Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. And this is episode number 154 of the show. I have 6 new reviews just for you folks at home. And that includes the Steel Hounds, the Artar Chronicles book number 1. Then it's going to be Steel Heart, Hub World book number 2. After that, it'll be Apocalypse 2020 Into the Black. And then Core of Fear, a Paranormal LitRPG Dungeon Core Spirit Core book number 1. Long titles. Then after that, it'll be Battle Spire, a crafting LitRPG book, Hundreds Kingdoms book 1. And then it'll be Freedom Online, the Copper Rose, a LitRPG fantasy. So we have 6 new reviews for you folks at home. And before we get into that, though, we're going to go into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we just have a couple stories, including one about Dakota Kraut and Mountain Door Press. He actually did an author interview with Stephen Rowland recently. Stephen Rowland is the author of Sentence to Tro and Pangea Online. Fun series all around. Definitely go check out his work. And you can also check out in the show notes the link to the Facebook page where Dakota Kraut interviewed Stephen Rowland on Facebook Live. So there you go. Also, I did a LitRPG hangout with Charles Dean, Jeff Hayes, and Xander Boyce. We talked about Xander's hit novel Advent Red Mage. We got pretty silly as we hung out. There were people drinking. It was kind of a Drinking and Charles thing on the Sambo Theater page though. So go check that out. You can see us getting silly and weird as all of us hung out and just had a really fun time. So there is that as well. A quick update from Michael Scott Earl on the Amazon situation there. Nothing like super amazing, just like a small update. He has a Marine status, so it's not that, unfortunately. It's really just like a quote from him. He updated his fans on his Michael Scott Earl super amazing fan page. I think that's what it's called. And here it is. It says, update time. Lawyers have communicated with Amazon. They've asked me to show them all my advertising stuff in places where I promote my books. My lawyers have asked them to give us details about the specific reason they banned me, aka evidence I was doing anything wrong, since they didn't bring any to the meeting. Our next meeting is February 14th. Fingers crossed. It goes well. Thanks for hanging in there. And that's the entirety of the update. It really is just, we're moving along, lawyers and stuff. And that's kind of what it amounted to. So that's all the LitRPG news we have. We do have more stuff that it's out now that I haven't had a chance to read. That stuff came out this last week, including Volper Alformi, book number 1. That is out now. That is a translation work from Russian. Also out now is the second book in the Chaos Emperor series, called Chaos Emperor, Undead, the World of Games. So if you like the game series, this is another entry into that series. Also out is Reborn Apprentice, a LitRPG adventure. There we go. Also out is The Monolith, a LitRPG novel, Bloodseekers, book number 1 by Stephen Rourke. You actually might recognize his name from some other works that he's done in the genre. And to surprise of many, including myself, Shimer Kuzit's Life Reset novel, the third one in that series called Life Reset Hobnobbing. It's the third book in the New Era Online series that is actually out and available now for you folks to read and enjoy and binge on. It was supposed to come out, I think, at the beginning of February, and the author just came back early from the proofreader, so publish. So it's out now for you guys. Also out is 1,000 Drunken Monkeys, book 2 in the Hero of Thera series. So I know a lot of people have really enjoyed Hero of Thera book 1, though it's been a really long time since book 1 came out. But now you got book 2. You got book 2 to enjoy. It is available this instant as you're listening to this podcast. Please wait till you finish listening to the whole podcast before you go read it, because you're probably going to be reading that for a while. Also, the Way of the Shaman comic book is actually out on Amazon. It's actually available on Kindle Unlimited, so you don't have to spend a ton of money, because it is a little expensive, I think, as a direct purchase. But it's available on Kindle Unlimited, so you can actually read it there. So there you go. Way of the Shaman, the comic book. Okay, those are all the ebook versions of LitRPG that are out now. We actually have a few new audiobooks in LitRPG as well, including Eden's Gate, The Omen, the 5th book in that series. So Edward Brody's Adventures. The 5th book came out actually not that recently, not that long ago, as an ebook, but the audiobook is out as well. Also out as an audiobook is the 4th dungeon in the Divine Dungeon series, Dungeon Desolation, and it's doing really well on Audible. If you look at their page for science fiction fan, it's like the top one. At this point, he has a lot of fans, so good for him. Also out as audiobook is Desire Volume 3. I only personally read Volume 1, and I enjoyed it, but it kind of felt like a standalone. But other people have really been enjoying the series. That is a LitRPG series as far as I'm aware. So it's out as an audiobook, the third volume in that. Zombie Slayer, a LitRPG Apocalypse is also out as an audiobook. It's a story. I personally didn't enjoy the ebook version of it, but some people might enjoy the audiobook version, or people who've enjoyed the ebook version might also enjoy the audiobook version. There you go. So those are all the stuff we have for ebooks and audiobooks. In upcoming LitRPG, this is just where I read up a bunch of stuff where I know that it's coming out in the near future. There are some new additions to the list. If you're interested in pre-orders or things that are coming out, here it is. On January 29th, Neverfall Catacombs, book number 2 in that series will be out. January 30th, Hope Engine. On January the 30th as well, this is a new one, of course, Viridian Gate Doomforge, which is the 6th book in the Viridian Gate Online series. Then it'll be February the 1st into February. We'll have Adventurer's Bond, which is the 5th book in the Adventures on Brand series. On February the 1st, the latest novel from the Mountain Dale Press, rather. One of their new authors is publishing on February the 1st as well, called Into Light Axe Druid, book number 1. That'll be new to the list here. This one's also new to the list. It's actually it's a book in the Viridian Gate Online universe. It is not written by J.A. Hunter, though. It's written by D.J. Bowden, who is actually one of the authors who submitted a short story in the anthology collection for VGO, for Viridian Gate Online series, their anthology. He was one of the authors who submitted a story, and I guess the publishing house liked it so much that they decided to sponsor a new book. And so it'll be out on February the 12th of this year. So Viridian Online Nomad Soul is what that one's going to be called. Out on February 14th, it is the 4th book in the Good Guys series called For the Loot. February the 15th, Scourge of Souls. It's the 4th book in the Realms series, written by C.M. Carney. The Borrow King is probably the one that's most recognizable from that series as like a popular title. Also on February 24th is going to be Collide Everborn, book number 2. February 26th, Cat's Game, book number 1, another translated work from Russian. The 2nd book in the Artar Chronicles series will be out on March the 5th, called The Black Turtle. We're reviewing the 1st book on today's podcast. Book number 2 will be out on March the 5th. From the co-authored Level Up Knockout series, Max Lagno is Absolute Zero, Adam Online, book number 1. That'll be out on March the 18th. The final novel in the Level Up series by the author. It'll be out on March 25th. That's The Final Trial, Level Up, book number 3. New to the list is Transformation, book number 2, Dark World, out on March 27th. Now, this actually might have seen this author. He recently had a Real World LitRPG story. The cover was like them running towards a plane. It's hard to connect you to this particular cover because they don't really match stylistically necessarily. But this is the 2nd book in the series, and a lot of people actually like that one. This is also another translated work from Russian. So there you go. And that's almost it. We also have on April the 10th, Edge of the Abyss, Respawn Trials, book number 1 by Andrew Lividini. He's actually the author of the I forget the name of it now. The name escapes me, so I had to go. Anyway, he's a well-known LitRPG author. It's a Goblin series, Green Ears, and I forget. I don't know. My brain's not working at this moment, but he's also already established a LitRPG author, and also another translated work. A lot of translated stuff seems to be coming out in the near future, folks. So if you like that, great. But this is a different series from that one, from the Dark Herbalist. That's it, Dark Herbalist, the Dark Herbalist series. So they're on the on April the 10th. So we have all stuff coming out all the way up until April. So enjoy. But for now, we're going to go into new releases and reviews. And here we go. And in new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with a review for The Steel Hound, the Artar Chronicles, book number 1, written by Vladimir Vasilenko. There we go. It is 374 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Stan, also known as Mongoose, is an extreme tracer and a freerunner whose real-life talents attracted the attention of the Steel Hounds, the most notorious and private clan of the virtual world of Artar, famous for serving the Grey Cardinal. While the political landscape for this new world is yet to form, intrigues, conspiracy, daring raids, and sabotage are the main weapons of the Hounds, and his evaluation has just begun. To complete it successfully and become a full-fledged member of the clan, Stan will have to adapt to working side by side with his most unique people with shady backgrounds. Even if he is not a team player by nature, and has already failed at the very beginning by choosing the least suitable class for teamwork, Battle Monk. Stan is rebellious, free-spirited, and daring. He risks his life every day just to avoid getting bored of the daily grind. Normally, an expelled student has no hope of entering the virtual world of Artar, an expensive online VR project, but when a suspicious organization offers to pay all expenses to let Stan in for a special purpose, Mongoose gets his chance to become one of the select few. However, to successfully complete his trial, Stan will have to face his main enemy, himself, while finding peace and mastering all 5 styles of the battle monks of Artar. So they were actually, that's not a bad description of the story. I think it actually, the first part of it actually really encompasses the series goal as more than just this particular novel. This is really the introduction to this world. And I think this is, if I'm mistaken, this is actually already a well-established series in Russia, with multiple books already ready, and they're just translating them and putting them on Amazon at this point. This is a slice of life translated novel from Russia with a monk as a class for the main character. Honestly, I think it's actually a little underappreciated in sales. Actually, I thought this was going to do a lot better than it did. It's mostly hanging out like on Amazon sales rank is about 5,000. I think currently it's under 2,000, but it hasn't really done as well as I thought it would. And for whatever reason, maybe just people don't look at it and it doesn't scream LitRPG to them from the cover. It absolutely is. The game mechanic-wise in the story, it's really unique in some respects, but also intentionally light in others. It's intentional in that there are no HP bars. There's no HP in the story. There's no mana bars. Same thing. There's no damage notifications or numbers you can track of, and you can kind of see that the author honestly didn't really want to track that stuff, and that's totally an author's decision. But there is still RPG progression. The only RPG progression here is that you see the main character's stats increase as he fights monsters. There's a game mechanic in that as you beat a monster or a player, you get to absorb a certain percentage of their stats. And while most, and this is minor spoiler, but I think it's a unique aspect that deserves a little description. Most character classes don't get to choose what they get. It's already pre-assigned according to their build. The monk class, however, because they have a unique ability to see all the elements, can actually choose which stats to pull from that monster or that character. So if they want to build a character with a bunch of like dexterity or strength or wisdom or whatever the case is, they just absorb those particular stats. And it's actually kind of an interesting way to customize a character, and it's unique to the monk classes in particular. Mind you, the monk also uses those same elemental absorptions to power his powers, his monk powers. So there's a balance there. But there, like I said, there's some very interesting mechanics to come with the story. The RPG progression, though, is super minimalized in that there are no levels in this game as well. In this game world, there's really just like, increasing stats and showing up, and not showing up as like you being a better fighter, you being able to do better things and jumping and all the stuff that comes with stats. But there is RPG progression. It is, however, relatively light as far as like the RPG portion of it. There are other game mechanics in the story that are more MMO based, and that you get item descriptions, class descriptions, you get ability descriptions, all that kind of stuff. But you also get a lot of MMO culture, and I think that's probably going to be the bigger draw for most people. That's going to satisfy their desire for LitRPG stuff, is that there's a lot of MMO culture here, and that includes behaviors of characters, behaviors of guilds. In particular, the story in the series seems to be real heavy on guild conflict. And you can actually tell just from the writing, this author has a lot of experience with guilds and their politics and their desires to carve out a landscape in an MMO kind of thing. So there's all that in there. I think that's probably one of the bigger detailed sections of the story. Story-wise, it's a pretty slice of life story. There's a pretty even mix between monk class development, quirky adventures, and guild versus guild conflict. And those are kind of the three main like story arcs for the story that kind of like go one after another and then interchangeable. There's a little bit of intrigue in the story too, which is also mentioned in like the novel description. However, it's not really heavy in this story necessarily. I think it's more of a series thing. Like it becomes a bigger thing there. Also ties to the guild stuff there. The monk class, while not seen often, isn't amazing here. I thought that was actually one of the more disappointing things, especially because of the cover. Don't expect the main character to be a kung fu butt kicker right from the start. This is, again, really just an introduction to the class in book one, some of the few things that he can do, and you can kind of see like an idea of like, oh, this class could be really super cool if it develops. And I think that's more of a series goal, like developing the monk class and making it super amazing and awesome. Here it really is just like an introduction to the class and some of the things he can potentially do with it. But it's not super impressive in this first book. Remember, this is already a series that's already kind of done, I believe. So it's probably going to develop more over the course of the series. There are interesting, good related plays for power, real estate, alliances that seem to focus on the series. And those themes are interwoven fairly well into the action and adventure parts of the main character story. So while light on RPG progression, it's an interesting story. I actually liked it. And it's interesting enough to get me to book 2. It gets a score 7.4 out of 10. The Steel Hounds, the Artar Chronicles, book number 1 with a score 7.4 out of 10. There we go. On to our next review. It'll be Steel Heart, Hub-World book number 2, written by Chrissy Moss. It is 103 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. There are great dangers in the forest. Jupiter and Cass have slain the were-rat and freed the inhabitants of Vigil from the deadly plague. Now it's time to get a little more serious about exploring the new world and leveling up. There are bandits to slay and creatures to hunt, and what is lurking out in the ocean? Follow Juniper and Cass on new adventures across the sprawling world of Yelvia. This is book 2 in the Hub-World series. So there you go. This is actually a short story series that's just being released on a semi-regular basis. The price point in this is a little expensive. It's about 3 times what I normally pay. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, I'd say this is the way to go. But for $3 essentially for 100 pages, I'm like, oh, that's a little pricey. But I understand why the author does it. So okay. The review for this is kind of the same as it was for Rogue. I read book 1. I thought, oh, this has potential. There's some cyberpunk stuff here that doesn't really work for me because it breaks the game rules a little bit. And that was my review basically. I'm like, oh, 6 out of 10. This doesn't really work for me because of those reasons. And book 2 kind of has the same review. Still gets a 6 out of 10 for slightly different reasons. But in a lot of ways, book 1 is a mirror of book 2, like structurally at least. It has cyber thriller bookends with like emphasis like, oh, this is what happened in the story, cyber thriller, and the end, oh, more cyber thriller stuff, and then some casual RPG adventuring in the middle. This is a decent short story. It's not super compelling, unfortunately, for me. Character development is done well. In the story, there's good banter between the 2 main characters, and I think that's probably the highlight of the story, is like their character development, the way they interact, and the way they like joke around. The adventuring feels a little more focused in book 2 than it did book 1. In book 1, that middle adventuring stuff felt kind of random sometimes. And in book 2, it feels focused in getting you to a place of like series plot development, and I don't want to spoil what that means, but the adventure, definitely the middle adventuring, RPG adventuring, felt more focused towards that, and that's definitely an improvement. But for me, it's a short story. It's like less than 100 pages, and it didn't really feel like there's enough room to really develop like a super engaging plot, unfortunately. And again, it's not necessarily a boring story, and there are some good elements, which I've already mentioned, but overall, it just didn't really work for me. I'm probably still going to read book 3 just to see if it continues to do well. I think this is like a 3 or 4 book series that's planned. And I hope it does. I think the series has potential. It's just not really working for me, for whatever reason. So it's still getting a 6 out of 10 for me. Other people might like it. It does have strong female characters written by a female author. So that might put it over the top for you. But for me, it's like, oh, that's not like cyber thriller with a random adventure. Like by the time you get through that adventuring, there's like barely time enough for plot development for the cyber thriller part or for anything advancement in that respect. I'm like, oh, and then it's in like, oh, that's, just I feel like once all 3 short stories are put together in one series and like one longer book of like 300 pages, it'll probably feel a little more fleshed out. Like it'll feel a little better. But for now, there's like just doesn't quite make it. Sorry. Okay. Next review, Apocalypse 2020 Into the Black, written by James T. Witherspoon, written 241 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Here is the author's description. The Leech have begun terraforming the Earth. The only way for Scarlet and her group to stop them is to leave the planet and venture into the vastness of space in the alien ship they found within Area 51. With the Leech hunting them and the little direction on where to go, they must find the Leech mothership and disable the terraformers before Earth is turned into a place unfit for human life. Also, there is a girl in the box labeled Goddess and whatever mysteries she holds. Outside the game, Scarlet and Bran prepare for their first Apocalypse Con, a convention where all the players from around the world will come to play together. The finale of the Apocalypse 2020 trilogy will either see our heroes triumphant over the alien army or dead, with the Earth soon to follow. So there we go. Full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased the novel when it became available. Okay, it's a nice conclusion to the series and wraps up all the big storylines that started, and it really does give you like a good finality. I personally liked where the real world storyline went and how it mixed with the game story. It's really good stuff. Actually, the author mentions it in the novel description. The convention aspect is like, oh, that's a really good way to like get everybody together, tie it in. It's very culturally like gamer central, and it also ties into like the storyline a little bit. It's like, oh, like nice. It really was. The story, the Indian story drops you right in the middle of a space battle and quickly differentiates itself from the previous 2 books with lots of space opera tech game stuff. This really does feel genre-wise different than books 1 and 2, and it really is. In some ways it's going to be really nice for some readers, and in other ways it's going to be like a disappointment, and I'll get to why. You could actually start the series here in book 3. Like it feels that different. The author gives you enough information to tell you who everybody is in the story, but the setting shifts so much from previous books, from like Apocalypse RPG to sci-fi space opera-ish. It shifts so much that all the sci-fi stuff has to be set up anyway, so that it's like I said, it could almost be its own like introduction to the series. Like this could almost be the first book in a new series or whatever. That's how different it feels in some respects. Just for the real life storyline, just remember that the story is set in the late 90s, and so you'll see reference to like LAN parties and other pop culture stuff, and that's why, just as a reminder, because again, I had to remind myself what this was about. It's been a little while since I read book 2. Now, one of the only things that was kind of disappointing seeing the story is how it loses a lot of the game elements, especially the RPG portions of it. And I completely understand why the author does this. I messaged the author and I was like, hey, is this, do I have the right copy of this? Because it doesn't feel like the same story in a lot of ways. Like all the Apocalypse RPG stuff is gone. And instead it really is like the space opera kind of setting, space stuff. There's lots of like lasers and spaceships and improving the spaceship components and stuff. And like PPU and, things like that, space battles and futuristic setting, like space stuff, like spaceships and new planets. And it really does feel different. But what's missing is like the RPG progression stuff. And I was like, oh, I kept looking for it. I was like, oh, like, where is it? Where's that stuff go? Like I kept expecting, like after a big battle, like, okay, they're going to level now, right? Like they're going to level and they're going to get new abilities and some progression that way. And it doesn't exist. And I'm like, oh no. So I messaged the author and he's like, yeah, there's none of that here, unfortunately, this time. It felt like he said that he felt like it would be forcing it into the story. And I can't argue with them. Like, okay, you're the author, that's your thing. But I'll be honest, that's probably the thing that stops me from liking it. Because, and this is just my opinion, other readers are really going to love the changes. Some people really love sci-fi stuff. And so it'd be like a nice change of pace for them. Same characters that they might like, different setting. But for me, it was like, one of the things I liked about this series, like how much effort the author put into the RPG mechanics. Like book 1 to book 2, the RPG mechanics changed a little bit. And it was nice to see like the expansion of those things, the same way you would see like an expansion in a novel series and like a game series. And in this respect, it feels like the new expansion is almost like a new game in some respects, because you were losing, like, you're just carrying over characters into a new game almost. And it definitely feels in line with the story world. Like, it's all explained perfectly well within the context of the story. So I'm not saying this, not there. There are other game elements still in the story. You'll still get characters using abilities that you've seen in the past. You'll still get little notifications about like health or the use of skills and fails. So like not all the game mechanics are missing. It's just there's no more RPG progression. So I'm like, oh no, that's nothing RPG anymore. That's kind of the thing I like most about it. You know what I mean? Overall, the storyline is still good. There's lots of action. There's lots of adventure. But I'll be honest, like part of my brain checked out when I realized that there wasn't any more RPG stuff. And again, it's just like, again, I could be expecting after like big battles, we're like, oh, they're getting a ton of XP here. They're probably going to level. And it never happened. And at some point I was like, oh, just a little disappointed. And so it's kind of stopped me from like really enjoying the story. Like I said, it's not a boring story. It just kind of lost that LitRPG goodness that was developed so well in books 1 and 2. So for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10, which is almost sad because like the story itself is like I said, it's good. It's just that it was disappointing for me to lose all the RPG stuff that I'd come to enjoy that was really well done in books 1 and 2. It just disappears in book 3. And I think there's actually a scene in the story that kind of, to me, like reflects like the author's view of it. There's a scene at a convention, in the game convention, where like the two main characters and the game designer are having a conversation. And they're like, oh, not everybody likes this new expansion. And the game does like, yeah, I'm not sure if we're going to continue expanding on the story because the sales for the new expansion, the space part, is like they aren't doing as well as we thought. And he's like, I just wanted people to enjoy the story, and like they could always have gone back to the apocalypse portion and the RPG stuff. He's like, but I just really wanted people to enjoy the game that I made, and I feel like that's the other part. Like, he just wanted people to enjoy the story, and I think there are going to be people who do enjoy the story, even though it loses some RPG goodness. But at the same time, like, from the other 2 books, I don't know that it's an unreasonable expectation that the RPG portions are going to continue into book 3. And so for me, 6 out of 10, Apocalypse 2020, Into the Black. And there you go. Okay, next. Core of Fear, a Paranormal LitRPG Dungeon Core, Spirit Core, book number 1, written by Jonathan Brooks. Okay, this is 296 pages, $2.99. Very nicely priced. It's also available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Do you ever wonder why spirits take the actions they do? What if there is a system of rules they had to follow? Clive Logan is a serial killer. Or, to be more accurate, Clive Logan was a serial killer. Caught after a record-breaking streak of murders, he was executed by lethal injection by the state while thousands of his victims' grieving family members watched. That should have been the end of his emotionless and unfeeling existence, but it wasn't. Sent to hell, where he enjoyed himself entirely too much, he was singled out to become a spirit core, an invisible spiritual entity that eventually ended up back on Earth. At first unfamiliar to him, his new incarnation slowly revealed itself to have its own set of rules, following something not unlike the video games he used to program back when he was alive. At its root, he was tasked with invoking fear upon his new victims. But there was just one problem. Having never felt any emotions before, he had no idea what that meant. And it says, as it contains a little bit of elements such as level progression and statistics. This is absolutely a little bit of story. However, I have to say from the reviews, this is a kind of a polarizing story for a lot of people. Some readers really, really hate it, and some people really, really like it. And I think I fall personally in the middle of that. The story is honestly not really my thing. This is a dungeon core story mixed with the movie Paranormal Activity. So if you've seen that movie, and you like dungeon core stories, you're probably going to really love the story. I don't like that movie. I like dungeon core stories. I really do. And the RPG mechanics in the story for the dungeon course aspect of it, nicely done. Math works out, progression increases. It's all there. That is not without question. It's an absolutely LitRPG story, no issue. I just don't like scary movies. I don't like horror stories. I don't like seeing people get hurt. I don't like reading about it in that respect, in that horror-ish aspect of it. For some reason, and I know this seems weird, like I can read a super action-y adventure story where like people are being like killed by the dozen with a single swave of a massive blade or something, right? I can do that. But like the detailed horror descriptions or like movies like that, nope, not my thing. Like it really isn't. Like And that's what this is. This really is Paranormal Activity as a dungeon crawl show. I think the author somewhere describes it as like, oh, he wondered, like, oh, watching those kind of movies, what it would be like for the spirit entity, like why they do the thing. And in his mind, he's like, I wonder if that would make a good dungeon core story. And like I said, from that respect, the dungeon core aspects are well done. They make sense. They have their own like interesting mechanics. And I think this is an interesting experiment in doing a different kind of story. But for me, it's just like, nope, not my thing. Sorry, I can't help that. So it is there. Like the main issue is like the ghost, the main character has an RPG interface and he uses it to get upgrades his abilities, and his goal is basically to scare these innocent people to death. And so that he can like level up and he can send their souls to hell. And I'm like, it really isn't. It was just not my thing. I'm not into horror movies. I don't think it deserves necessarily a bad score for that. It's just not really for me. And that's perfectly exactly what the score 6 out of 10 is. Like 5 out of 10, boring. This is snooze fest. 7 out of 10, this is good. Go read it. 6 out of 10 is like, it's not either one of those. This doesn't work for me, but other people might really like it. And I think, again, people who enjoy horror stories or enjoy like scary movies, and they like the dungeon core concept or like the RPG progression things added to that, I think they're really going to enjoy this. It's just not my thing. So scored a 6 out of 10 for Core of Fear, a Paranormal LitRPG dungeon core, Spirit Core Book 1. Such a long title. Gets score 6 out of 10. So there we go. Okay, next. We have Battle Spire, a crafting LitRPG book, Hundreds Kingdoms, book number 1, written by Michael R. Miller and published by Portal Books. Okay, this is 408 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Jack Cross only wanted to play the game. Now he's fighting for his life. When a mysterious hacker takes control of 100 Kingdoms, Jack is trapped inside this fantasy VR world along with millions of other players. But Jack is in a worse predicament. He's cornered in the very tower the terrorists have taken as their base, the only free player left within its walls. Even worse, in the real world, his body lies in a sweltering room with no hope of relief. Playing the profession-based scavenger class, and at a low level, Jack's prospects of fighting his way out are next to impossible. Crafting gear, traps, weapons, allying with a deadly dungeon master, and an AI he can't fully trust, Jack is in a race against time to save not himself, but the millions of players held hostage. There we go. And there's some other things in there like, oh, Battle Spire is a meaning of World of Warcraft and diehard using crunchy LitRPG mechanics with focus on crafting. And some of that's true. But the novel description before that, it's definitely true. The beginning of the story, I'll have to say, while not badly written, comes across as just another LitRPG story with a wimpy main character and a sword art online premise where it's trapped in the game and dying the game down real life. And I'll be honest, when I read that portion of it, I was like, oh, I almost put the novel down. I was like, oh, great, another one of these. Because I'll be honest, I read like 2 of these a week where they have that same sword art online premise. And I'm not sure why people think that it's necessary. It usually doesn't add anything to the story, and it doesn't take away from this story in particular in this case. Like there's a lot of other better things that kind of make up for that like tropey premise. And this story definitely eventually turns into something else. I'm actually glad that I didn't put it down. And it's actually a relatively popular story actually on Amazon. It currently is like the top 300 and it's done really well in the rankings. Like a lot of people are reading it already. It's like 45 reviews. It's only been out for a couple days. So a lot of the people really seem to enjoy it. There's a lot of like humor in there. There's the game mechanics are really, really solid, consistent, and will definitely please people who like crunchy RPG details. Overall, it's kind of a fun story. It has some homages to Die Hard. I wouldn't say it's a copy of it. The story combines like a crafting class with a coming into a hero story in like a good way, and that's kind of what this is. Is it super amazing? No. The most unique aspect of it's definitely the crafting class skills, but even then it's like a bunch of crafting that feels a little planned out in advance, but it's still a fun story. Like it really is. It's enjoyable. This is actually getting the best score out of anything I've read this week with a score of 7.5 out of 10. And that's just because, again, good writing. In the back of the novel, you can see that there were the author acknowledges that there are several LitRPG authors and beta readers who help make the game mechanics a little more consistent and interesting and cohesive. And like some places you can tell this, right? Like there are definitely places where like, oh, that feels a little bit forced, but it's not technically out of the realm of what's been established by the game mechanics. But like I said, if you just don't take it too seriously, enjoy the ride. It's really enjoyable, and I had a good time with it. So that's all that really matters. Score 7.5 out of 10. Battle Spire, a crafting LitRPG book, 100 Kingdoms book number 1 from Portal Books. So good for them for getting out another LitRPG. They're a publishing company that seems to be focused on LitRPG and game stories. So this will be their second book, I believe, being published, and this one is definitely getting a more good press. More people seem to be enjoying it. So there you go. Okay, on to our last review, which there we go. Freedom Online, The Copper Rose, the LitRPG fantasy, written by oh man, that name is way down there. Dan Legarde. Sorry, I'll have to look it up real quick. The name is not really clear on the thing. It's David Lingard. Sorry, man. Okay, here is the review. It's 332 pages, $3.81, and it is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here is the author's description. Freedom Online. The Copper Rose is a story of a virtual world that is populated by all kinds of mythical beings, along with a playership that is somewhat less than savory. Imagine that you have been placed in a world that rewards actions of all kinds but seldom punishes anything. Without rules and boundaries, the human race is left craving a sense of limits, something to rebel or fight against, and as that bar is constantly moved, or in this case removed, the results are somewhat alien. My story is that of being placed in an unknown world where anyone can be friend or foe, and I use the mechanics of role-playing, massively multiplayer, and strategy games to build a home for my newfound friends and I. Jealousy and revenge are powerful motives for violence and ones that I could find difficult to evade. Includes character stats, settlement building, skills, levels, and comments. So there you go. I'll be honest, the cover does not do this story justice. It's like the cover is very not telling you absolutely anything about the story. This gets a good review from it. It's a little on the lower end of 7 though. The beginning of the story, it's a bit brutal. It sets up the bad guys, and some people are going to be turned off at the first few percentage of the novel. Like it's genuinely like, oh, that's gross, or like that's it, but it's meant to set up the bad guys as being super bad. However, most of the novel is really just a slice of life town building story. Like you can actually tell this is either a web serial story where it's been collected and put on the Amazon, or it's just kind of this stream of consciousness writing thing. The novel almost is entirely slice of life town building. There's not much plot. There's not much you can tell that there's not much super advanced planning in the story. And there's vague threats from the bad guys occasionally. But that's all it really comes down to. There were several good action scenes in the story, but again, most of it, I'd say easily 80% of it, 80-85 is just town building stuff. The town building elements are well thought out. They're thorough. They are kind of reminiscent of one scene from Life Reset. So if you like that element of that other story, you might like this one as well. Overall, it's a good story if you're in the mood for town building. I just don't expect much else. And that's kind of what the review is. Gets a score of 7.3 out of 10. Freedom Online, The Copper Rose, the LitRPG fantasy, gets on the slightly lower side of the 7 score of the good score, just because it really is just focusing on just town building. So if that's what you want, that's what you're in the mood for, you're going to like this story. If you want other things like a plot, probably not, because it really is just that aspect of it. And it does what it does well. There you go. And that's it. End of the show. The last review. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Thanks for following us and watching me. You can always follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our webpage at LitRPGPodcast.com, where you can see all of our reviews, all the 800 and plus reviews that we have on there from the lifetime of the podcast. You can go search for specific things there in our novel recommendation page. You can also see all the author interviews we've done. If you want to help the podcast of this week, go like us on YouTube. Follow us there. That's one of the first places you can always see the new episode of the podcast. You can always subscribe to them. That'll help us get the word out for everybody, of course. There are a bunch of other places to find LitRPG stuff. And of course, if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, make sure you keep this podcast ad-free and free to people. You can find out all the ways to support us at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But until we get to hang out again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for, again, taking the time to talk to me and to watch me talk about something I love, LitRPG. And until we can do so again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.